Welcome to the Behavioral and Screening Practice Series from the AI Mock Interviewer Question Bank. Behavioral and Screening Part 1. This episode has 17 questions. For each question, take a moment to think through your own answer before I share a strong approach. Question 1. Leadership or behavioral? Backstage plugin. What Backstage plugins or templates would you prioritize for a GCP platform team? Here's a strong way to approach it. Prioritize a software template plugin for scaffolding new services with pre-wired CI or CD and Terraform. A tech docs plugin so documentation lives alongside code and stays discoverable. A catalog or ownership plugin so every service has clear ownership metadata. And a Kubernetes plugin surfacing live deployment status directly in Backstage. Add a cost visibility plugin once basic adoption is established, since cost transparency tends to be a high value but secondary priority after the core golden path experience is working well. Nice. Let's continue. Question 2. SRE or reliability? BigQuery cost and performance. A BigQuery workload became slow and expensive. How would you investigate query patterns, partitioning, clustering, slots, storage, and ownership? Here's a strong way to approach it. Use the information schema jobs view to identify the most expensive and slowest queries by bytes processed, and check whether tables are partitioned and clustered appropriately for the query patterns actually being run. A full table scan on an unpartitioned table is a common and expensive mistake. Check slot utilization and contention if using flat rate or reservation pricing. Review storage costs for tables that could benefit from life cycle policies. And identify query ownership so the team writing expensive queries can be engaged directly on optimization rather than the platform team guessing at intent. Great. Moving on. Question 3. Automation or platform? SRE toil. Give examples of toil in DevOps or SRE work and explain how you would measure and reduce it with automation. Here's a strong way to approach it. Common toil includes manually provisioning infrastructure per request, repetitive incident triage steps that follow the same pattern every time, manual certificate or secret rotation, and hand-running the same diagnostic commands during every on-call shift. Measure toil by tracking time spent on these recurring categories, via ticket tags or time logs. Prioritize automation by frequency times time saved, and treat toil reduction as a real backlog item competing for engineering time against feature work, justified with expected ROI. Alright. Next question. Question 4. Security or DevSecOps? Load balancing. Design a global external HTTPS load balancing strategy for multiple services. How would you handle SSL, backend health checks, Cloud Armor, CDN, and observability? Here's a strong way to approach it. Use a single global external HTTPS load balancer with URL maps routing to different backend services per path or host. Google managed SSL certificates for automatic renewal, and health checks tuned to each backend's actual readiness signal rather than a generic TCP check. Attach Cloud Armor for WAF or rate limiting at the edge. Enable Cloud CDN for cacheable content to reduce backend load and latency, and monitor per backend latency, error rate, and Cloud Armor block count so issues can be isolated to a specific service quickly. Let's keep going. Question 5. CI or CD or GitOps? Jenkins modernization. A company has old Jenkins pipelines. How would you modernize without disrupting releases? Here's a strong way to approach it. Modernize incrementally rather than a big bang rewrite. Start by converting Jenkins files to declarative pipeline syntax and moving shared logic into version shared libraries. Then migrate agents to containerized, ephemeral build environments instead of long-lived static agents that accumulate drift. Run the modernized pipeline in parallel with the old one for critical services until confidence is established, and prioritize migrating the highest maintenance burden pipelines first so the effort pays off quickly and builds momentum for the rest. On to the next one. Question 6. Observability. Dashboard design. What dashboards would you build for executives, SREs, platform engineers, and application teams? Here's a strong way to approach it. Executives need a small number of high-level, business outcome-oriented metrics: overall availability, major incident count, cost trend, without technical detail. SREs need slow burn rate, error budget status, and incident or alert trends across services. Platform engineers need infrastructure health and capacity trends across the whole fleet. Application teams need service-specific golden signals, latency, traffic, errors, saturation scoped to just their own services. Each audience needs a different altitude of information, not the same dashboard with more or less zoom. Good. Here's another one. Question 7. Leadership or behavioral? Prioritization. You have security backlog, cost pressure, and reliability incidents. How would you prioritize work for the next quarter? Here's a strong way to approach it. Prioritize based on actual risk and business impact rather than whichever is loudest. Address any security findings with active exploitability or regulatory deadline first. Then reliability work if incident frequency is trending up and threatening customer trust. With cost optimization worked in continuously as lower risk. High ROI items are identified rather than treated as a separate large initiative. Make the trade-off explicit and visible to stakeholders. A prioritized backlog with reasoning so the decision is defensible and revisitable as circumstances change. Nice. Let's continue. Question 8. SRE or reliability? Runbooks. How would you build a runbook library for common GKE, Terraform, IAM, and networking incidents? And how would you keep it updated? Here's a strong way to approach it. Start runbooks from actual past incidents rather than hypothetical scenarios, capturing the exact diagnostic steps and commands that resolved them, and structure each one with a consistent format: symptom, diagnosis steps, resolution, escalation path, so on-call engineers can navigate them quickly under pressure. Keep them updated by making runbook review a required part of every postmortem. If a runbook was wrong or missing during an incident, updating it is an explicit action item, not an afterthought. Great. Moving on. Question 9. Behavioral or screening? Can you describe your professional background and highlight the experiences most relevant to this role? We don't have a model answer recorded for that one yet, so it's a good one to research on your own. Alright, next question. Question 10. CI or CD or GitOps? Walk us through a time when you improved the CI or CD pipeline for a project. What challenges did you face, and how did you address them? We don't have a model answer recorded for that one yet, so it's a good one to research on your own. Let's keep going. Question 11. SRE or reliability? How have you implemented observability and incident response practices in previous roles? Give an example of how these practices improved system reliability. We don't have a model answer recorded for that one yet, so it's a good one to research on your own. On to the next one. Question 12. Explain your current role and day-to-day responsibilities. Here's a strong way to approach it. Describe your role in terms of ownership and impact, not just a task list. What systems or platforms you own, what decisions you're trusted to make independently, and what a typical week actually looks like, e.g. a mix of production support, infrastructure design work, and cross-team collaboration. Include one or two concrete recent examples so the answer feels grounded in real work rather than a generic job description summary. Good. Here's another one. Question 13. Why do you want to switch your current job? Here's a strong way to approach it. Frame this around what you're moving toward, not what you're running from. Growth opportunities, technical challenges, or scope you're seeking that your current role doesn't offer. Rather than criticizing your current employer or team, being specific about what attracted you to this particular opportunity, not just a change, signals genuine intent rather than generic job hunting. Nice. Let's continue. Question 14. Why do you want to work at a product-based company specifically? Here's a strong way to approach it. A strong answer connects to real differences in how product companies work. Owning a product end-to-end and seeing the long-term impact of engineering decisions, being closer to the customer and business outcomes, and typically deeper technical ownership versus a services or consulting model where you rotate across client projects, grounded in what you specifically want more of: technical depth, ownership, product impact, rather than a generic statement that sounds rehearsed. Great. Moving on. Question 15. What is the most challenging problem you have faced in your career, and how did you handle it? Here's a strong way to approach it. Pick a genuinely significant, specific problem, a major incident, a difficult migration, a technical decision with real trade-offs, and structure the answer around situation, the actions you specifically took, and the measurable outcome. Being honest about difficulty and what you learned lands better than a story where everything went smoothly. Avoid vague or overly broad answers. Specificity is what makes this answer credible. Alright, next question. Question 16. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Here's a strong way to approach it. For strengths, pick 1-2 genuinely relevant to the role with a concrete example proving each, rather than a generic list of adjectives. For weaknesses, choose something real and specific, not a disguised strength like I work too hard, and pair it with what you're actively doing to improve it. Self-awareness plus a concrete improvement plan is what interviewers are actually listening for. Let's keep going. Question 17. Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Here's a strong way to approach it. Describe a realistic trajectory of growing technical depth and scope, e.g. moving from individual execution to technical leadership across a bigger platform or team, that's consistent with the role you're interviewing for, showing you've thought about your own growth without sounding like you'll be bored in the role or planning to leave quickly. Anchoring it to the kind of work this specific company or role would let you do makes the answer feel genuine rather than generic. On to the next one. That wraps up this episode. Nice work practicing, and see you in the next one.